So in the last section, I spoke to you about the difficulty levels, the importance of being very conscious and considerate about the companies or your chosen distribution partners as far as their relevancy is concerned, and how easy it is for them to literally take on your product and be able to sell it. And we kind of really deep dived into that just a little bit to give you some examples of how it could work and how it couldn't work. And I left you off with this example here of what I believe to be masters in the game of distribution networks and having a channel built like that, which is big pharmacies and big pharmaceuticals, I should say. And remember I said, if they're spending $100 million on marketing, they're spending double, if not over double, on their marketing and efforts and resources towards educating, convincing, and working with their distribution partners. So that would include, in this case, the pharmacies, the doctors, the clinics, the hospital, the insurance companies that they're working with, and all the things that go and get involved with doing that, from the paperwork, the legislation, the requirements, the approvals, to the events that they do, and all the things that they do to nurture and build and maintain these relationships. Because why? Because they know that those companies have access. All of these companies or entities have access to the customers that they want, and those are the patients in need of a painkiller or whatever drug that it is that they're selling or that they've just manufactured. So that's an example. And I said we're going to go through the 5 steps now of how to basically make that work. Okay. How to properly execute against that. And the 5 steps are reverse engineering. That's the first thing you've got to do is reverse engineer. You then evaluate your options after you've kind of dismantled everything. What options are there? And for those that you want to work with, how do you onboard them? How do you then manage them and then keep them working for you? How do you nurture them? So these are essentially the 5 steps to basically putting together your distribution network. Question is now, how do you deal with it? So reverse engineering, who are your buyer groups? Well, in the case of the pharmaceutical, we know that the buyer groups are the patients in need. So if we're reverse engineering, what you're trying to do is find out who the pre-existing or the established businesses or entities are that work with those buyer groups. Okay. That's what you're trying to figure out. So if you're selling a pharmaceutical, or you're selling a pill as a pharmaceutical, and you know that this pill is going to be helping people relieve pain. So what happens when people are in pain? They go to their doctors or their hospitals, right? So you know that those are the established business partners that you want to get involved with. If you're selling sneakers, if you're selling cameras, you're going to go to the relevant outlets. You're going to think, where do people go? Well, if they're going online, they're looking online first, they're buying online, are they going in store to try things on? You're going to start dissecting and dismantling all the different businesses that exist as established or pre-existing partners to those buyer groups that you've identified. And then you've got to figure out what locations you're going to work with. Okay. Are you going to go global straight away, which is great? Or are you a service-based business and you can't go global? You've got to do it within your city. Think about what markets and what geographical locations you're going to work within. Like if you're only speaking English and everything about your product is English, there's no point looking at other countries that don't speak English, right? So you want to figure out how you can tap into where you're going to tap first. And of course, there are ways in which your distributors can help you tap into other markets if they really get behind you and they start translating things for you. That's a bit deeper or a little bit later on. But the fact is, you've got to start picking and choosing what you want to do. That's what you do when your first step is reverse engineering. Then you've got to evaluate the options. After you've dismantled it like that, you want to look at what it is that you have in front of you. Look for the partners with the experience in your chosen market. So if you've like for example, if we go back to the pharmaceutical here, I'm going to keep relating this. I think it's perfect. If you're looking at a certain pill, you've got to look for, if they're a pharmaceutical, they've got to look for, if they're choosing which partners they want to work with first, they're going to choose maybe pain clinics first. So all clinics can essentially sell their magic pill, but if it's a pain medicine, they want to target pain clinics. Doctors that focus specifically on that type of thing. Insurance companies that have the coverage or that they've been able to convince to cover that medicine. They won't bother with the other ones. And this is not to say that you can't tap every market or every potential partner. It's really about what's going to give you the best results immediather. So you want to make sure that they have the best experience for whatever it is that you're selling. And of course, evaluate them further to find out whether or not they have any competing products or services. Now, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? The question is, does it matter? If I'm selling sneakers, I want to work with a company that has a lot of sneakers to sell, right? If I've made a brand new shiny pair of sneakers and that's my business and they're great for running, I want to work with a company that has loads of options out there and they have lots of different companies buying it. But then equally, and you've got to take this into consideration, would it be better to work with the ones that don't, where they'd put more resources, time and effort into really selling your sneaker as opposed to something else? Well, that can backfire as well because you don't know how good or successful they are. The question that you've got to think of is, which is better for you based on how you've structured your business? If you've structured your offering or your product sale where that margin is a small figure that you're only able to pay out, then if you go into the company that has lots of competing products and services, maybe they might not be so inclined to really put much effort into selling yours. They may agree to put you on the shelf, but they may not sell it as heavily as you want it. So if you've got lower margins, you perhaps may want to go to the companies that don't have as many competing products. But then equally, if you've got high margins, you can go to both. So it's something to consider. It's something to think about, but evaluate your options nonetheless. Onboarding. So once you've found the different companies that you want to work with, you've cherry-picked them, you've chosen them, you think these are the companies that you want to work with. This is how you start bringing them in. So when you start speaking to them and you present to them your idea, you present to them your business plan, you present to them the product or the service or whatever it is, and you've got their interest, you've got to start establishing the requirements for your business relationship. And so in merchandising, it's pretty straightforward, right? This is how much it costs. This is the wholesale price, and this is how much you can probably sell it for. That's your markup or that's your margin. But if you go into more complex business cases where, for instance, if I'm working with real estate investment companies, there's a lot more that goes into play. If I'm setting up an advertising agency and I'm working with smaller subsidiary advertising agencies to basically drive traffic and business over, and we start doing profit sharing, there's going to be a different type of onboarding structure. And that would include talking about profit splits and commissions and fees and having that all planned out at the upfront in the beginning stage. So that they understand what their expectations are. So you can manage your own expectations, you can manage their expectations. Of course, if you're selling products or services, and you can go back to the sneaker one here, if you're going back to merchandising, whilst you may not be talking about profit splits and fees, you may be talking about territory splits. If you've gone to certain sportswear shops, you may see that some shops carry a certain style of sneaker, whereas others don't, but it comes from the same brand. It's because some companies are given exclusivity agreements. Some have territory restrictions. You want to make sure that whatever it is that you've planned as far as your scale and your distribution is concerned, as far as really creating your business plan and how you expect to execute with all these different companies helping you, you don't want them overlapping and fighting amongst themselves. You want to have that all clearly defined on the outset. So that's part of the onboarding phase. Management. Once they're in, you've got them all in. They've accepted the terms. They've agreed to the way in which you expect that relationship to go. How do you keep everyone on the same page? Well, how do those pharmaceuticals do it? How do they do it? They are constantly educating the doctors. They are constantly training. They have training programs going into clinic. They're sending pamphlets, leaflets, information packages, videos. They're constantly communicating to these companies or to these entities information about their product, their plans with that product, or how they expect to evolve over time. They're constantly letting everyone know. They're doing the same thing with insurance companies, and it's the same thing you'll be doing with any distribution partner that you work with. If you have them and they're bought into your idea, and they're now considering selling it, or they've just started selling it, you manage them by constantly communicating. But you can't keep calling them, say, how many deals have you done today, or how many have you sold? You don't want to be that person, because they're just going to start hating on you after that. What you need to be doing is communicating in a way that's productive for everyone. That is scheduling training, scheduling events. I mean, these could just be parties. So every quarter there could be some kind of an event where the top sales companies or territories can come over, or if you're in a certain place, you could set up these events off the cuff where people can come together and mingle. And it's a way for you to interact and communicate to keep people on board. That's what you're trying to do. You're always trying to keep people on the same page by communicating your message. And of course, you have different ways of doing that. Education on best practice. So this is a really nice one to do. And I do this all the time with my real estate companies because I'm always concerned about them mis-selling my products or services. In this case, the real estate investments. So whenever I call them, I say, so how's it going with your aftercare with the clients? How's it going with this? What are you doing as far as representing? Are you representing this information? How are you selling it? You're not saying the word guarantee, are you? I'm using my training opportunities to really communicate with them, but I'm also finding out what's happening with them too. And they're giving me really direct feedback on the ground level. So equally, as much as it is for you to manage them, it's also for you to take information from them too. Remember I told you about this earlier in module 1 about how distribution networks will give you a direct pulse on the market in terms that when you're speaking to them, they will tell you what's happening on a day-to-day basis, on a minute-by-minute basis. So that's really important for you. So that's number 4, management. And finally, nurturing. How to keep them playing the game for as long as you can. So you're managing them daily. You've got them the products. They're happy. You've picked and chosen everyone that you want to work with. You've brought them on. You're managing them. How do you keep them working? Well, it's consistent support. I talked about training. But really when it comes to, education's one thing, but to keep them really playing with you, to keep them really working with you, it's really going to come down to support. And how does support come in? It comes in through marketing planning. You could be helping them work with, so if you've got a number of distributors and you've got one here who's doing events and one here who's doing telesales and one here is doing just pure online marketing. Your consistent support to, let's say, these 3 different distributors of yours, that consistent support may come in the form of telling which one is doing better. So if you're saying to your 3 different distributors, hey, the guy who's doing online marketing only through webinars and through videos, he's blowing you guys out of the water. I mean, you guys are doing great with your telesales and you guys are doing great with your events, but I think that you could benefit from taking on online marketing and let me show you how they're doing it too, so that you can sell more of my product because that's what you want, right? So consistent support and helping them help you, right? You're helping them make more money, which is of course making you more money. And your staff should always be able to pick up the phone. You should have, and this is what I said about it. You're not creating huge sales teams. You're benefiting from having your sales teams external to your business. You're having the aftercare taken care of outside of your business. You're benefiting from all the advertising, the strategies and tactics that they will be they'll be burdening the cost for. They are carrying that cost and you're benefiting from the trial and error. But for you to become useful for them outside of you just providing the product or service, you should be telling them and helping them in terms of what's working because you know the answer. You know that the online sales are being sold, are making way more money than the event sales or telephone sales. So if you know that, you've got to let them know. You've got to be able to have your team will be more of like an administration back office team where you're constantly speaking. And that's what happens with me, with my head office in Manhattan, with the parking, my private equity company. We've got back office accounting. We've got people who deal with the administration elements to everything with the business. We've got internal law counsel, and then we have client managers. And they're not managing investors directly as much as they are managing the other distribution partners that we have out there in the wide world who are promoting and selling our investments for us. So this is a very, very, very important thing in terms of keeping people working for you, because ultimately, if they stop, you stop selling. So you want to make sure that this is looked after consistently. So that is really it for the 5 steps, and the rest of these, like I say, as we keep progressing through each module, I'm getting deeper and deeper in terms of what's practical, in terms of how you start dealing with things on a day-to-day basis, in terms of how do you find them, how do you keep them, and how do you work with them on a long-term basis.